Hello everyone, my name is Sven. I'm the Managing Director for ForestFoods. I grew up here in Kenya and I've been in the regenerative agriculture space for about 10 years. First with our farm up in Timau called Tamalu. That was really the pilot project and where ForestFoods started 5 years ago. ForestFoods was then born in late 2021 and we're standing on our first farm up here in Limuru, which is just over a year old. ForestFoods has three main components to it. One is to figure out and to scale profitable reforestation models for the different agroecological zones in East Africa, starting with Kenya. Number two is to make small and medium acreages profitable again, or in fact productive again. And then really on the third front is to provide transparent, traceable, nutrient-dense food. ForestFoods really uses Syntropic Agroforestry as its main production model. Syntropic Agroforestry uses natural succession and therefore different phases of different crops in stratification in space and in time. And so we're able to grow a huge diversity of crops on our farms based on where they sit in natural succession and what space they occupy in terms of stratification. So in Limuru alone we have over 97 different vegetables and herbs and 49 different tree species, a combination of indigenous and non-natives. Obviously at high altitude in Kenya there's only a certain amount of crops you can grow. So up here we've got a big focus on the brassicas, so cauliflowers, the different broccolis, cabbages. We've got a big focus on some of the herbs, rosemary, sage, thyme, dill. We've also got a big variety of lettuce. We've got carrots, rainbow chard, spinach, different types of peppers. We've got a focus on 5 fruit varieties. We've got avocado, seedless lime, raspberry, apple, and now actually plum and pear we're just introducing today actually. Currently this first field is still in its horticultural phase. We've got a combination of fast growing annuals as well as a part of our field that's dedicated to pasture. And we grow pasture raised chickens, so we're doing pasture raised eggs. The advantage of these eggs over your conventional eggs is that our birds are able to graze every day on a fresh piece of pasture, and although we do still feed them layers mash, they're able to forage every morning and every afternoon before we feed them with this layers mash. So this gives them a much wider variety in their diet, making the eggs a lot more healthy, but also making the birds a lot happier, a lot less stressed than conventionally grown birds. So similar to that with our vegetables and our herbs, we don't use any synthetic inputs. So we do every day with our post-harvest waste, we produce compost, and so periodically we will take that compost and look at it under the microscope, make sure it's got the microbiology we want it to have, and then multiply it when we do compost extracts and apply that in the field. So we try and take advantage of an evolutionary relationship between plant root systems and microbiology, the way plants have co-evolved for over 1 million years, and really focus on the biology being the driver of the nutrient density of our plants, but also of the nutritional profile of our plants. And so I suppose if I'm to differentiate our production methodology versus organic, for an example, or versus conventional, it's very much utilizing these evolutionary relationships that have existed for over 1 million years between microbiology in the soil and the plants that they then feed. The plants also in turn feed the microbiology by providing them sugars that primarily come through photosynthesis and the sun. And I suppose, yeah, through a couple of early tests we've already done with species like broccoli, where we've compared our broccoli to conventionally grown broccoli, we're finding a lot higher in most vitamins and mineral content. So yeah, we're looking forward to doing a lot more of those tests for our other crops, including some of our perennial fruits. And I suppose alongside that, in the medium and long run, we're also producing regenerative or eco charcoal by pruning a lot of our trees, as well as timber. So those are really the products of the future: fruits, timber, nuts, and charcoal. So we often get that odd question of, how can your style of farming feed the world? I think if by now we haven't realized that the conventional method is failing to feed the world, and that anything different is a potential solution, then we do really need to wake up. But conventional farming already has the potential to feed 10 billion people, according to the statistics, but a lot of that is thrown away, and most of that is empty calories. And when I say empty calories, I mean that a lot of the conventional but commercial commodity crops that are being grown today have been hybridized so much and are grown in such poor conditions that they're empty calories. And by that I mean they just don't have the same nutrient profiles to what their ancestral varieties had. And so even without talking about only commercial cash crops, but also focusing on vegetables, fruits and herbs, if we want them to have the nutrient profile that they're supposed to have, the only way they're going to get that is if they're grown in soils that have the biology to allow them to pick up all those micro and macronutrients from the soils. And I think that's where really the difference lies in our production methods versus conventional, is that we're really trying to harness the diverse nutrient profile that our plants are able to absorb through their root systems from the soils. And I think a lot of the empty calories that we're eating nowadays are also causing major problems with our gut health, right? And the only way to replenish that gut health is really to be eating plants as well as animals that contain those high nutrient profiles, and they get that from the soils they're grown in or the water they're grown in the case of aquatic species, So I think that's, for me, the main difference really, is understanding, or the willingness to understand, a different way at looking at what your plants need and what your soils can do. I don't think we have a shortage of nutrients in our global soils. We just have a mismanagement of the concept of how to utilize those soils to the fullest extent. And I think the more and more consumers that are aware of the differences between some of the alternative growing methodologies versus the conventional ones, the more support production systems like ours will get in the future, and the more accessible it will become to the masses. Obviously right now we're really focusing on premium produce, but there's nothing to say that when we scale and expand our territories that we can't grow conventional cash crops in the same manner as we're doing here with some of the premium produce we're producing. Yeah, so we've been training people from, well, all over the world really, but primarily Kenyans and East Africans for the last 4 years. We have a training module every month up in Timau, and we will start doing trainings on this farm here in Limuru, as well as our future farms in Ruiru and at the coast. And really the idea, once we're able to incorporate partnerships with small organized groups of smallholders and landowners, is that we're able to spread this production system across different communities living in different agroecological zones in Kenya. Each zone will have their own recipe, will have their own models, and so really our longer term goal is to be able to influence as many farmers and as many landowners as we can with this production model. I think from a social perspective, abundance is what solves a lot of problems. I think primarily in Africa, when there's shortages in food, when there's violence based around food systems, it's because there isn't that abundance. And I think these agroforestry systems allow for abundance. And I think that's what's such an important characteristic, is that it can actually cause a lot of peace. Another really important function I find with agroforestry systems is because they follow natural succession and they're continuously getting more complex and more mature, is you're never doing the same thing every day. And I think a lot of drive towards making farming sexy again in this part of the world is to add that bit of technology, the bit of mechanization, but also to make it fun and a learning curve, you know, turn it into a career. And that's where I think the agroforestry model fits all those pieces, because it's continuously evolving, and you're no longer finding farmers that have planted the same crops for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? You're constantly changing your focus in the system, and you're constantly working with different crops at different ages, different trees. And so I think that's one of the main beauties about it, is bringing back those perhaps older polycultural systems that our ancestors were using, but applying a lot of modern knowledge, technology, and mechanization to it. And I think that's what's going to drive you know, a huge part of the youth towards agriculture again, is if we can make it sexy like that. We're standing in our second field, which was planted in November 2022, so it's about half a year old. In this field we've focused on only indigenous trees in the tree lines, and obviously vegetables and herbs in the vegetable lines. It's just interesting to see this field versus the other, because the other field, you'll notice, seems a lot more mature, even though it's only 6 months older, but that's because there's a mix of non-native trees as well as natives. Production on this field is actually really good, because it was an organic farm before for about 20 years. So very nice deep soils, and yeah, we're just experiencing really good growth rates here. So yeah, this is 0.35 hectares, and our other field up there is half a hectare. So together we've got nearly a hectare of production. So on all of our current farms and our future farms, we'll always have an open door policy. In fact, we very much promote our customers coming to see what we do. We're an open book in that respect. We'd love to teach you guys about how we do what we do, and why we feel it's important you support this type of agriculture. So please do book a farm tour. You can book those through our website. And of course, if you want our produce, you can get it off Greenspoon, most of the time same day delivery. And yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for all the support so far. I know we've got a lot of supporters out there, and thanks to Greenspoon for being our #1 off-taker so far. Asante sana.